Time for a heavily requested episode with the latest episode of Death Battle, Wile E Coyote versus Tomcat. So this is a matchup that, as I said there, was heavily requested, as this was an episode that won the Season 10 Tournament of Champions, which was a tournament-style bracket of matchups to determine fan-requested episode that would be made for, at the time, Season 11. It consisted of 8 weeks of 4 separate matchups against each other, and then 2 semifinals, and then a grand final, over the course of 11 weeks. Wile E versus Tom was from week 4, where it beat Luke Skywalker versus Saber, Hiccup and Toothless versus Hero and Baymax, and Sackboy versus Maxwell. And then won week 9, where it beat Monokuma versus Sapporo Sensei, Gru versus Megamind, and Sailor Moon versus Madoka Magica. In that week 4, it was pretty much a clean sweep. It had 49% of the votes. And it's still pretty high. It had 43% of the votes in week 9, where it won out there, which is a lot, but it was close to Gru vs. Megamind, which had 39%. And then in the final, it was up against Kratos vs. Asura, and it won out not too much. It was 54% against 46. To be fair, a lot of the results of that Tournament of Champions I definitely disagree with. For instance, here is the actual Tournament of Champions, how it turned out, and I've marked essentially the placement of each matchup and how well they did that week. And here is what I would have wanted out of the matchups given. As you can see, Wile E vs. Tom didn't make it out of its own week. But to be fair, I did not like that week. I did not like any of those matchups very much. But it turns out a lot of people did, and now we have it as a full episode, even though Kratos vs. Asura got made before it. A little goofy, but whatever. We have the episode now, and what did I think of the episode? Overall, I would say I was whelmed. I was completely whelmed. I have no strong feelings one way or the other. I was fully neutral the entire time, I think, which is weird. Like, there's good stuff in this episode, but boy howdy, I was very much just like, yep, I am going through the motions. I was perfectly whelmed. So, let's talk about that. Let's go with the first combatant, Wile E Coyote. So I think a big thing with my opinion of this episode is definitely I like the Looney Tunes. Like, I watched, Looney Tunes stuff when I was younger. I thoroughly enjoyed the Brendan Fraser Back in Action movie. I think that's super fun. However, I never really liked Wile E Coyote. I enjoy Roadrunner cartoons, but I don't know, I just never liked him. Like, he's just kind of a dickhead. I just didn't like him. He's not meant to be lovable, but I just don't like him that much. Like, I preferred, other Looney Tunes, like Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, and like Marvin the Martian. Like, those are the fun ones. That's a part of the reason I don't really care for the matches, because I was not thrilled with him. But I do really like the analysis for both these characters, but let's talk about, Wile E Coyotes here. Because you have to go into the, near 100 years of history of these animated shows, and like all the various things that happened. One thing they didn't bring up, Lunatics Unleashed, where they tried to make them like edgy superheroes, because there is one that is a descendant of Wile E Coyote, but it's a descendant, doesn't really matter. As for him, there's fun stuff, go over the Acme stuff, the various gadgets and gizmos, and even just the intrinsic nature of the Looney Tunes, because apparently they have just like the Looney DNA thing, which I would argue for certain aspects that it shouldn't work for all tunes. I think in this context that we're going to be using it for, it works out pretty okay, but it would be contentious. And it is also like the main deciding factor of this. I do enjoy whenever they discuss essentially like real world applications for things that don't fully matter, like going into like the nature of a coyote. Yeah, it's interesting. Doesn't matter in the slightest for the context we're going into, because he's a cartoon. Him being a coyote is just a visual aspect. And yeah, one of the big things that they had to bring up, and has been brought up a couple times over the course of the waiting period for this episode, which actually I'll get back to in a second, is that the creator of Wile E Coyote and the Roadrunner, Chuck Jones, had a list of rules that would occur for every single cartoon they were in. And more or less it exists as like, the Coyote can't really win. And he's always humiliated. He's always hoisted by his own petard, essentially. That was definitely a big argument point. And now that I mentioned the waiting period, which I probably should have mentioned at the start, but I'll get back to you. This one had a real annoying one. Because Death Battle fans, especially with the extra week of waiting between episodes now, because it went from 3 weeks to 4 weeks, these people go a little insane, and sometimes it's fun and fine. Like with C1 vs. Kyle, it was mostly just a lot of people being like, look at this cool thing from a thing you might not have seen, especially because there's 20 to 30 years worth of comics with Kyle Rayner in it. So there's a lot of stuff to show off. And then just, people that haven't seen Gurren Lagann going back and watching Gurren Lagann and seeing it's a cool show. They decided to instead just like flip it on its head and be like a artificial slander war between two characters. And not all of them were in very good taste, which made this a long wait for an episode that I wasn't super excited for. Back off the tangent. And let's talk about the other combatant who I'm more interested in, Tom Cat. So similar to Wile E, I do find it fun where they analyze the real world Heist Cat stats and abilities, even though that doesn't really matter in this context. But I like it. It's fun. That's a part of the thing that I like about Death Battle. And also learning the name origin for Tom and Jerry, very interesting, where they were named after characters from an old English play that eventually just became shorthand for rabble-rousing. And then I still think the part at the start probably also came from that, which is why they were called Tom and Jerry. I definitely enjoyed Tom and Jerry a lot more than the Looney Tunes, I think. Or at least I definitely saw more of it, because that was one of the shows that just would come on, I see. Especially because they did have runs during the 2000s that I would have seen when I was younger. And also just the concept is always fun. Of just, you get to see some wacky hijinks. It's not really much to talk about with either. It's wacky hijinks. There's not a narrative that occurs between them. The only real difference is just how they interact with their prey. The Roadrunner kind of exists outside of Wile E for the most part. He's just doing his shit and then just turns around he's fucked himself over again. Whereas the cat and mice of Tom and Jerry are, as I pointed out, they're friends and also somewhat evenly matched. That was one thing from Multiverses, where Tom and Jerry were a playable character, which was super fun, is that all of their animations were more them fighting each other, and the attack was essentially the opponent being caught in the crossfire. That was super fun. Shame the game wasn't as fun, but I just don't like platform fighters that much. Just looking at fun, weird moments from the history of these characters. And also I had to bring up Tom and Jerry Chess, a Chinese gacha game where for some reason they become Sun Wukong and Erlang Shen. So, he is for some reason an ancient Chinese mythical figure. Very strange. I just have more fondness for Tom and Jerry than I do for Wile E, Coyote and Roadrunner. So that's kind of where I was going into from the beginning of the fight. And speaking of, let's talk about the fight. Now, usually I would bring up the voices. However, there isn't any voices in this one, or at least not any notably credited. All the voices are clips from Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry, because I think those might just be public domain at this point, because they're quite old. Though it is listed on the credits below the video that Billy B. Burson, the voice of Ringmaster, was credited as additional voices. So he probably did a couple things that might have slipped through the cracks, or at least is not listed on the wiki yet. But yeah, it's fine. You get all the good sound effects that you have from, especially Tom and Jerry, which apparently all of them are noises that William Hanna made, who's, the Hanna of Hanna-Barbera. So I do enjoy all that. So let's also talk about the music for this episode, Wild Tomfoolery by Theirwolf Media. It's pretty good. It's not blow my ass out like some of the previous ones. It is definitely a score for a cartoon of this, but it's a good mashup of Looney Tunes sounds and Tom and Jerry sounds. Which, to be fair, they're fairly similar, especially because Warner Brothers owns both of them. Theirwolf Media is really good at the just kind of mashing two signs together. I do enjoy that. Again, I don't have too much to say on this one, but let's move on to the actual fight. So outside of the Tournament Champions, there was also the Kickstarter. One of the stretch goals to that Kickstarter was that an episode would be fully animated by Luis, one of the notable animators of Death Battle. And this was the episode that was funded by that. And it is very nice looking. And there's a lot of fun stuff in it. There are definitely parts in it that I think are not as good as, at the very least, the last one Luis did, which was Scooby-Doo versus Courage the Cowardly Dog. And there's going to be a lot of comparison between these two, mostly because they are quite similar, kind of thematically almost, but I think Scooby vs. Courage is just more fun. Yeah, one thing that happens immediately in the fight, which is very fun, is that all the characters are given the Roadrunner cartoon nameplate with fake Latin name. So we have Jerry as Housemice, or Moose as Holoclus. Pretty fun. Tom was Domestic Cat, or Felis Catus Perpetuus Victimus. And we have Greta Roadrunner, Meepus Meepus, good, and Coyote, Canis Schmuckus. And one was a little blink and you miss it, but whenever the fight starts, it says fight, and Championus Choisticus. Very nice. I do appreciate that. And I think all that's very fun. However, it takes a while before the fight actually starts. Like, how long is this fight? The fight is 3.5 minutes long. I think that takes up like a full 30 to 40 seconds. So it's like, it feels like the fight takes a while to actually begin. And then there's certain parts that are just like recreations of like moments from the show, which I appreciate, but I think it's hard for like one indie animator to recreate like old cell animation. Like the part where Tom is doing his evil laugh while he's about to eat Jerry. It's a fun recreation, but it is, especially because like, you know, the actual visual of that is very much lodged in my brain, and it just isn't as good. And it seems mean that it's not as good as this very well done animation, but it just kind of isn't. There's a lot of moments that just feel like these are characters that are like never not moving. So whenever like they hold a pose for like a little too long, it feels off. There's a lot of just fun like references that happen throughout the fight though. Like there's an Among Us and a Fall Guy on a shelf. There's whenever it turns into a battlefield for one reason or another, Wile E is loading up the Fat Lady, which is the bomb that we see at the end of Deadpool vs. the Mask. That one's fun. There's a lot of just fun aspects. I don't really enjoy this episode as like a fight, but as like a fun little cartoon, I think it's pretty fun. When he drinks the speed potion and they're running around on the map, but they have to, you know, stop for a breath. Very good. When they then have to dive out of the YouTube video for a second, that one's pretty fun. Yeah, all the like YouTube videos that they put in the when they jumped out though, very funny. I enjoyed all of them. They're all super fun. We'll see if any of them lead anywhere. And probably my favorite like joke in the episode is whenever they're falling and Wile E pulls out Looney DNA Dissolver, that's what it's called. Tom has to put on his reading glasses to read it. I think that was great. Love that a lot. And they did do a pretty reasonable fake out where they both get hit with the Dissolver, so they're clearly both vulnerable, and then the heist drops. And that, like, the little fight they have there where they're bashing each other with the signs, and the sign keeps changing for dialogue, that one's pretty good. I do think the death it's solid, but I think it has really good timing of just like immediate splat. And then there's ketchup everywhere, which has been confirmed. It was ketchup. So yeah, I think the fight is a fun like series of antics and like a fun cartoon. I wasn't super thrilled as a fight though, I guess. I do appreciate the gag Wiz has of thank God someone actually died this time. Overall, it's like not too... I personally, I don't have much to say. I was not thrilled by the matchup, and the episode itself perfectly whelmed me. Everything that I heard about from beforehand came to play. Wile E won. So, especially because like the one that I definitely like last won, you know, maybe I'm just mildly bitter there. But even then, I wasn't super thrilled going in. Like on the tier list, you know, this episode is cool, it's fine. It is going at the bottom just because everything else was better, in my opinion. Like there was something to think about. I wasn't thrilled. Apparently, like Luis does have another episode he's working on. Hopefully I have a stronger reaction to that one as I did to this one. Like, this was fun. I wasn't thrilled. And hopefully the next time will thrill me more, which is...
Okay, let's do this one last time, yeah?
This is the story of how I became the world's greatest hero.
Miles Morales versus Izuku Midoriya, or Spider-Man versus Deku. This does continue the feeling I had throughout the entire episode, where they announced this episode, and I am fully whelmed. It just, like, I'm not 100%, like, I'm not against this episode, I guess, but I'm not, like, super thrilled. Well, it's because, like, even for both of them, it feels like they kind of were just on the show. Even though it's been, like, 5 years since Miles' episode, and 3 years since Deku's episode. Though it does feel weird that Miles Morales is getting a second episode before Peter Parker does. And I definitely probably would have preferred Ms. Marvel over Miles, but, like, I don't know, I guess they're doing this one. And to be fair, both of them have gotten new stuff since last time. Miles has his, like, weird, like, lightning Green Lantern powers now, because he can make, like, lightning swords out of his electricity powers. And Deku, when they did that episode, My Hero Academia was still ongoing. Like, it was pretty close to the end, but it was still going. Now it has fully wrapped up. The anime still has like a season or so left, but the main story is over. It does feel weird, like we just got a My Hero Academia episode and we're getting another one. It should be fine. Let's see what this one is. Small tangent, I will say, they do need to get another name for Miles. Because I understand, like, their insistence of him just being Spider-Man, but whenever there's two Spider-Man, like two guys called Spider-Man, it's very hard to differentiate them. And then whenever you just have to call him Miles Morales anyway, it kind of misses the point of him being Spider-Man. Like, I remember I saw a thing that the suggestion was that if the book is about Peter Parker, it'd be called The Amazing Spider-Man. And if it's about Miles, it's The Ultimate Spider-Man, which is pretty fair. I do think kind of may just need an actual name for him. To be fair, I think they've tried in some animated shit. I think in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon from the Disney XD one, he was called Kid Arachnid, which isn't great, but needs something. But yeah, so this matchup should be cool, it should be fine. I am just fully whelmed by this month's events of Death Battle. But we are getting real close to episode 200, so hopefully there's something big in the coming weeks. And until then, see ya.